Welcome to Reasonable Religion. Today I'll be discussing 8 reasons I believe God exists.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Hello everyone, I'm Professor Blink. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Today we're going to be checking out a video from the channel Reasonable Religion, and boy is that an oxymoron if I've ever heard one. Not only are we about to be treated to 8 reasons why Double R here believes in God, but he's apparently coming out with some credentials. He's apparently a professor of theology, so as a professional in this subject, he should be giving us well thought out and structured reasons that don't employ any fallacies or old, often debunked classic apologetics, right? Hey, we can always hope. Now, while I do have the utmost respect for the halls of academia, I mean, it's where I go every day to impart knowledge and skills to knowledge-hungry college students, that respect doesn't extend all the way to theology. I think teaching about religion is useful, even crucial, from a historical or sociocultural or even a philosophical position. To get along in this world today, one is benefited from having a working knowledge of the various theological frameworks people are likely to encounter, and those theological frameworks motivate them, and how those frameworks are shaped by the society that we live in all throughout history. But professors who get to borrow the inherent credibility and authority of an institution of higher learning and use that to proselytize to the student body and tell them why their religion is true and correct, and you can trust me on this because I'm a professor in the field, that's a bad use of academic authority, to put it lightly. I hold religious apologetics in the classroom to be as academically valid as someone being a professor of Tolkienism, standing in front of impressionable students and telling them all about Eru Iluvatar and how he sent the 5 Ishtari to Middle-earth to combat the Dark Lord Sauron. But doing from a position of this really happened rather than from a position of literature appreciation. But he's not in the classroom today, not plying his trade to impressionable students. He's just telling us his thoughts on the matter and why he believes in God. So let's hear him out and get the ball rolling. But before we get to that, if you end up liking what you see in this video and would like to help out the channel, make sure to subscribe and click the bell so you'll always be notified when new content comes out. Check out my social media, including Patreon and Twitter, all linked in the description. And of course, like this video, pop in a comment. All that goes a long way towards pleasing the YouTube algorithm, which gives us countless reasons to believe in its digital divinity. May it keep my channel motoring along. Now on to today's video.
Reason number 1. One of the things that I've noticed for people who do not believe that God exists is that they define a God in which I don't believe. So, for example, an atheist would say something like, I don't believe in God because God is evil. Well, I don't believe in an evil God either. And if you go to my last video, you'll see exactly why I don't believe in an evil God and why the God I believe in is necessarily good by definition.
What the f- Wait a minute. So your first reason for believing in God is that other people believe in a God that's different from the God that you believe in? It should go without saying that that's not a reason to believe in any particular God. I mean, this is textbook non sequitur fallacy. When the conclusion does not follow from the premises, in more informal reasoning, it can be when what is presented as evidence or reason is irrelevant or adds very little support to the conclusion. And that's exactly what's going on here. This reason is completely irrelevant to the position that your God exists. All you've basically said is that I like my version of God better than other people's version of God. Well, so what? I mean, I can come up with any idea of God that I want. I can concoct a God who gives ice cream cones and blowjobs, or conolingus if you prefer, to all of its adherents every Wednesday. My God offers a perfect eternal paradise for nothing more than knowing all the lyrics to Journey's Don't Stop Believin'. And only has one rule that people need to live by.
Now, remember what I told you.
Don't be.
Now, just because I have imagined that great and awesome deity, is that any reason to believe that it exists as anything more than a figment of my imagination? And there's another fallacy that's being employed here that's a little pet peeve of mine. when you say your God is good by definition. Some theists like to define their God in any number of ways, as if doing so makes their God either more palatable, or even worse, more likely to exist based on that definition. Like when they make a version of the ontological argument and say that God is defined as being the best, the most good being, and existing is more good than non-existing, so by definition, their God must exist, since it would have to exist, as that's better than not existing. But this is just the definist fallacy, defining a term in such a way that makes one's position more easy to defend. I guess it's pretty easy to defend the idea that God exists if you define your God as necessarily existing. But in this case of this video, you're attempting to define your God as being totally good, therefore it must be so, because that's the definition. Doing this sort of defining of God allows for divine command theory to flourish. This is the idea that anything that a supposed God says or does, or commands, is automatically moral and good for no other reason than that God did it. This is an argument that's been used by religion to justify genocides, like the idea of the global flood. Oh, it was fine for God to kill every living thing on Earth, save Noah and his menagerie, because it was God that did it, and God is defined as good. So that must mean that it was good that he did that. Not only is defining your God as good not automatically bring that God in line with anyone's personal view of morality or our cultural notions of ethics, but more to the point of this overall video, no matter what the definition is of the God you believe in, that is not a reason to believe that that God exists.
The second reason I believe that God exists is because of the existence of morality. And this is a debate back and forth between atheists and theists or deists. I will pull the professor card here. So I am a professor of theology and I am also specialized in ethics. And I have not found a single convincing argument that compels me to think that ethics and morality can exist, or that standards of morality can exist apart from their foundation and grounding in God.
Well, for starters, you have no reason to be pulling the professor card at this point. Because this reason, the existence of morality, this is not a theological question. It's a philosophical question. And you're not a professor of philosophy. You're a professor of theology, so your professor card isn't warranted here. You have no more specialized knowledge in this field than anyone else. Furthermore, it's a tad gauche to even pull the "I'm a professor, so what I say matters more than your average bear" card at all. You don't see me doing it, do you? But anyway, finish off your point.
Let me be a little bit more precise. You can be moral and you can be ethical without believing in God. You cannot defend those ethical claims. You cannot defend moral claims without belief in God.
Oh, I beg to differ, good sir. In fact, given the incredibly subjective nature of morality and different cultures' ethics, I find the existence of morality to point away from the idea of it being God-created. So, the first thing that we need to establish is, what kind of morality are you talking about? Objective or subjective? Because, in my experience, the moral argument for the existence of God hinges on believing that there is an objective morality that is true. An objective moral law requires a moral lawgiver, and that moral lawgiver must be God. Except that, as I often retort, this is not a thing. There's no such thing as objective morality. It can't truly exist. All morality is based on value judgments that are rooted in subjective assessments of right and wrong. Even a moral law handed down from an all-powerful God would still be subjective, because God would be the one making those value judgments. But I don't even see that kind of subjective morality in the world, because any God-derived moral law should be universal. And yet, anyone with even the faintest understanding of history knows that there's not one single moral principle, idea, or standard that has ever been universal across all societies throughout human history. What are some you might think of? Don't murder, don't steal, don't harm children, don't betray, don't lie. Pick whichever one you want, and there's going to be countless examples of cultures who have done exactly that. Not just some members of the culture doing it, but the actual overarching culture allowing for it and normalizing it. Usually so long as they could argue that the people that they were doing those things to had it coming, or that any notion of not doing those things doesn't apply to those people over there because they're from a different tribe, or some other rationalization. But they still allowed for these things to happen. There's simply never been any universal standard of morality or ethics that has been present in every culture throughout time. So, understanding that, it becomes very easy to see that morality and ethics is contextual. It's based on a variety of factors that can include, but it's not limited to, the society's laws, or core cultural values, lessons taken from that culture's history, the influence of political or cultural figureheads, prominent theologies of that society and their teachings, animosity towards neighboring societies, or just the prevailing ethics and common moral framework of whatever previous societies that society grew out of. I mean, you say you don't see how ethics or morality could come about except through God? How can you not? Although ethics and morality are in reality very complex systems of gray areas with many contributing factors, it's still relatively easy to see how they form naturally. Humans are social creatures. We work well together, and that cooperation is really the primary evolutionary advantage that we have. That, along with complex language so that we can coordinate our efforts with precision. But that cooperation requires standards of conduct in order for us to function. It's as basic as if you need 5 other cavemen to help you lift a big rock in order to move it in front of your cave for better protection, don't stab one of the other cavemen helping you lift the rock as soon as they get it lifted. And from something that simple, that overarching idea of how to treat others in order to function as a unit, we begin to develop a system of what are positive pro-social behaviors that increase cohesion and collaboration, and what are negative antisocial behaviors that damage that cohesion and make outcomes worse for everyone, including oneself. I mean, how can you not see how ethics and morals could develop naturally without a god? All that's needed for any species is to have the intelligence to understand what strategies are successful and what ones aren't, realizing that working together with others leads to greater success than working alone, and therefore needing to come up with ways of behaving towards one another to foster that ability to work together. Eventual development of morality and ethics only requires 3 things as far as I can see. 1, the need, which any social species is going to have when it's required that they work together to get much of anything done. 2, the intelligence to recognize that cooperation is the best way to satisfy that need, and the intelligence to come up with a system for interaction with others. And then 3, time for that system to grow in complexity. If you have those 3 elements, morality and ethics will form on their own without the intervention of any kind of a god. I imagine if bees suddenly developed human-level intelligence, given their need for cooperation, it wouldn't take long for them to develop rules for how to interact with other bees. The very beginnings of ethics and morality.
Reasons number 3 and 4 collapse into one title, which is that atheism requires faith.
Paging Frank Turek. Before he even gets into this, a few brief remarks about how stupid this is. 1, since religious people often tout faith as a virtue, if you think atheists have more faith than you do, does that mean you think atheists are more virtuous than you are? 2, oftentimes theists, like Frank Turek, says this sort of thing in order to be salacious, because they're trying to get under the skin of atheists, and they think that that will anger atheists when they say that they have more faith than theists do. So then, if you're saying atheists have faith as an insult, does that mean you think that having faith is a bad thing? Or are you just trying to be confrontational and a bit of a dick? And then 3, certainly everyone would agree that it takes faith to be a believer in any particular god. So theists certainly have faith. And if you're saying that atheists have even more faith than that, then what is a person who has no faith at all, or minimal levels of faith? If you are on the Turk bandwagon and saying that you don't have enough faith to be an atheist, and someone says that they don't have enough faith to be a theist, then where does that leave them? What do you call someone who doesn't have enough faith to be a theist, and therefore, in your view, certainly doesn't have enough faith to be an atheist, since that requires even more faith? And since atheists and theists are true dichotomies, you either believe in God or you don't, there literally isn't a third option. But anyway, get back to your gross misunderstanding of atheism as a faith position.
You've probably heard this before, but one area where atheism requires faith is that if I am an atheist, I must believe that all things that have been created were created from nothing by nothing.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
There is nothing that atheists must believe. Absolutely nothing. Atheism is not believing in any god or gods. An atheist could believe in any number of things about where everything came from. They could believe in an eternal multiverse with universes birthing new universes infinitely into the past. They could believe in universe-belching unicorns from the 8th dimension. Or they could believe in the universe, or some precursor to the universe, like, say, a primordial singularity of hot, dense energy, existing as a brute fact, not coming into existence, but always existing, naturally becoming unstable and expanding into the universe we see around us today. That's what I personally, as an atheist, believe. I do not believe anything came from nothing. And I believe that because that's where the evidence points. And though I suppose an atheist could believe everything came from nothing, I have yet to meet any atheist who claims that. But supposedly it's something that all atheists have to think, even though no atheist does.
I think it's much more probable that all things that we see are created by somebody, even if it's out of nothing.
Why does it have to be somebody? Why does it have to be a thinking agent behind the formation of the universe? Why couldn't it happen naturally, without intentionality? Given what we know about how things happen naturally, like how energy works and moves from areas of higher concentration to lower concentration, that and the properties of thermodynamics making conditions favorable for atoms to develop, those atoms bond together, form elements, coalesce into stable matter, gravitational attraction forming celestial bodies, the periodic table of elements and how they interact with each other. I mean, all of this seems to happen without intentionality, and the universe we see around us seems to be exactly what we would expect to see given those natural actions and interactions, plus 13.8 billion years of time. If we found evidence that things happened completely outside the bounds of what we would expect given the natural forces at play in the universe, that might be a better reason to believe in God. But we don't. We find exactly what we would expect to find if there were no intentionality behind anything regarding the formation of the universe.
The fourth point, which is a subpoint of atheism requiring faith, is that the universe has order, beauty, organization. And the second law of thermodynamics states that entropy tends to increase within a system. Entropy here is disorder, disorganization, chaos. So left to its own, it doesn't make any sense that the world would be created the way in which it was. If anything, the creation of the universe should have led to further chaos, not further organization.
There's a lot I want to say about all that. Okay, so he's basically going with the teleological argument here, that the universe appears to be ordered. And this isn't an absolute shit argument. When I made a theist argument tier list, I put this one on the A level. Now, no theistic argument is convincing or without its flaws, but I could see how this one could be convincing to people who haven't thought about it too deeply. However, R here has stacked some other things on top of this that we need to address. For starters, he said that the universe has order, beauty, and organization. I want to start with the beauty part. Beauty is an aesthetic preference, and it has no place in this discussion. The universe does not have beauty at all. We humans find things to be beautiful. It's a perception on our part. It's an assessment. It's in the eye of the beholder. It's not an intrinsic thing that the universe has, whether we notice it or not. One person may look at a gaseous nebula and think it's beautiful with all of its colors and forms, while another person may look at that same nebula and thinks it looks like the stuff of nightmares. So get the beauty angle out of here. It's got no place in this discussion. Beauty is a matter of human psychology, not an extant quality of the universe. And then the other two things, he said, order and organization. In the context of the universe, those are basically synonyms. So he's just said that the universe has order. That's it. And sure, the universe has areas of order. There are places in the universe where there is structure, form, and things conforming to the laws of physics as we understand them. But there are also places in the universe where there is no structure, or form, or applicable physics as we understand them. Like, for instance, Boötes Void. An area of practically empty space with very little of anything in it that is 330 million light-years across. Now, for comparison, our Milky Way galaxy, which itself contains over 100 billion stars, is only about 100,000 light-years across. There's also, of course, quantum mechanics, where at the quantum scale, our understanding of physics goes right out the window. Then there's things like dark matter, which makes up about 85% of the total matter in the universe, and yet doesn't interact with the electromagnetic spectrum the way all other matter that we're more familiar with does. Thus, it can't be seen since light doesn't reflect off of it. These things, and many more, are examples of mysteries of the universe that defy what we would think of as order. So yes, there is order in the universe, but there's also disorder. And it would be more apt to say that both order and disorder are natural states of the universe, and we happen to live on a planet, in a solar system, within a galaxy where order seems to be more at play than chaos. But it would be folly to say that that means that the whole universe is that way when we have direct evidence that it's not. Then going on to talk about entropy. And R makes the common mistake that theists always make when talking about entropy. That entropy, or the tendency of a system to lose usable energy over time, is only applicable within an enclosed system. Cosmically speaking, we are not in very many enclosed systems. Our planet is not an enclosed system. Our solar system is not an enclosed system. Galaxy. And then, there's no scientific consensus on whether or not our universe is an enclosed system, as we're only capable of examining and detecting a certain part of our universe, not the whole of it. So what this means is that there is constantly energy moving from place to place. And the fact that entropy doesn't seem to increase disorder in our little pocket of existence that we experience every day, that would be our planet, is just because our planet is not an enclosed system, and we have a rather abundant energy source that's absolutely bombarding our planet with usable energy every second of every day. You may have heard of it. It's called the sun. Meanwhile, over in our previously mentioned Boötes Void, there's a hell of a lot more entropy, more disorder, more chaos than we see in our neck of the woods. This whole idea of the second law of thermodynamics and the existence of order working as an argument for God, it all hinges on the idea of universal uniformity. In order for that to work as an argument, the entire universe would have to be just as ordered, just as energetic, just as free of entropy as our tiny little blue marble. But of course, it's not. Energy, or entropy, is not evenly dispersed across existence. There are pockets of great order and other pockets of great chaos. Locations of great energy and locations of great entropy. And do you know what kind of universe we would expect to find that sort of cosmic makeup in? One that is formed naturally, completely free of intentionality.
If I were to pick up a watch on the street, I wouldn't say it is incredible how this watch came together spontaneously and tended to come into this organization out of non-organization on its own. I would say it's a really nice watch made by a watchmaker. Same argument applies to the universe.
Don't. Just don't. I'm hanging by a thread.
Why did you have to trot out the watchmaker argument? Couldn't you have at least dressed it up in different language? Couldn't you have said, if I found an Oreo cookie on the street, I wouldn't think it formed together on its own? Or a bottle of dish soap? Or a 12-inch dildo with a vibrating head? Something that would not be the same tired old line that you just stole from other apologists? I mean, it would have been easy to see through it as just a derivative of the watchmaker argument, but at least it would have been a fresh example. But yeah, this has been debunked so many times before, but this is an even worse version of it because you're attempting to tie it into the idea of entropy. Usually, the watchmaker argument just hinges on the watch being complex, thus it must have been made with intentionality, and the universe is complex, therefore it must have been made with intentionality, which is just an argument from incredulity fallacy, concluding that because you can't or refuse to believe something, it must not be true, is improbable, or the argument must be flawed. But your version is even worse, tied in with the entropy stuff, because you're basically saying that it takes energy to form things like planets, stars, galaxies, and the like, and there should be too much entropy for that. Except, since energy and entropy exist in higher concentrations in celestial pockets, it makes perfect sense that stars, planets, and galaxies form naturally in areas where there's enough energy and order for them to do so. You know where significantly less ordered things form? In areas where there's too much entropy for them to do so.
I am much more convinced that the order of the world was created by a person rather than completely by chance. The probability of the latter is very unstatistical.
It's very unstatistical? That's not a word. But even non-statistical wouldn't work, as that relates to something not employing statistics. I think you mean to say it's statistically low. Now, I don't usually burn people for saying things wrong. It happens to the best of us. I know it happens to me. But when you consider that A, you clearly edited this video, why you couldn't just go back and fix that, and B, you started off touting your highly educated professor credentials, and that you're an intellectual here, and then you come out with unstatistical. Anyway, it was just a funny little palate cleanser, because we're halfway through the 8 reasons, so moving on.
Point number 5. If I were not to believe in God, then I would necessarily have to believe that every single person who has ever had any religious notion from the existence of the universe until this point in time were absolutely wrong on all religious accounts.
Not necessarily, only that their interpretations were incorrect. I don't think a person is wrong who wakes up saying that they spoke to God in their sleep and God gave them visions of things to come or images of heaven and told them that's where they'll go if they keep the holy law and yada yada. You can absolutely accept that they had that experience, but I find it more likely that it was a dream than a true vision. Just a product of their subconscious and imagination rather than true contact with a deity. You can accept that someone with a horrible illness got better for seemingly no reason, but disagree that it was a miracle due to divine intervention. You can believe any number of religious experiences actually happened to some degree, but then disagree about their cause or how the religious decide to interpret them. And I mean, this shouldn't be difficult to see, even for you. I imagine you do this as well. Do you think all those millions of people who saw lightning bolts and thought they were literally magic hurled by the hand of Zeus were wrong? I bet you do, at least as far as it being Zeus' cause, but you still believe they saw the lightning. What about the millions who thought the sun was Ra sailing across the sky in a celestial boat? Sure, you accept that they saw the sun, but I bet you think that they were wrong about it being a god in a boat. Now, this may be a derivative of the Ricky Gervais line.
You deny one less God than I do. You don't believe in 2,999 gods, and I don't believe in just one more.
But you think all religious accounts outside of your own religion are wrong. And I agree. I just go one religion further and apply that same line of thinking to yours as well.
Point number 6, I alluded to earlier. One thing I notice in the debate between those who are religious and those who are non-religious is that those who are non-religious will say that I believe in science. I believe only in what I see and what I experience. First of all, science and religion are entirely compatible. There's nothing that has been discovered in science that is contradictory, at least to the Christian faith.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
Second of all, nobody entirely believes only in what they sense, in what they see, in what there is evidence for. Easy example is love. Everybody believes in love. You've experienced love. Love is beyond words. Love is beyond comprehension. Love is beyond the molecular level.
He really goes on talking about love and how it's some ethereal, magical thing and that it's beyond comprehension. Love, like all emotions, is a product of the brain. Mainly chemical reactions in the brain that cause you to experience those reactions as emotions. Love is primarily caused by the release of oxytocin, the love hormone. Taking drugs like MDMA, also known as ecstasy, can stimulate the production of oxytocin and result in the user feeling euphoric feelings of love and happiness. Yeah, sure, that's temporary, but that's because it's caused by an outside chemical, whereas our natural oxytocin production is dependent upon an experience or person, and interactions, thoughts, or memories of that person will stimulate that oxytocin production. But yeah, the point is, it's absolutely not beyond our comprehension. We understand how it works. But this whole diversion into love being some intangible thing is really just that. It's a diversion. It's a red herring. Because none of this is any reason to believe in a god. Maybe if you can't get your mind around emotions just being the product of brain chemistry, it might be a reason to believe in the supernatural. It might be a reason to believe in magic or transcendent experiences. I don't see how this leads you to believe in an all-powerful deity, though. I mean, it's like saying that I believe in the wind, even though I can't see it, yada yada yada, therefore I believe in Zentaris, the wind god, who sits atop the world with 4 mouths, one on each side of his head, and blows constantly in all directions. This just makes perfect sense, right? The thing is, that's not far off from how a lot of God concepts have been concocted throughout history.
Point number 7, humans are distinct. We have a consciousness that is distinct about us. We're able to think abstractly. We are aware of our existence. We're able to take ourselves outside of our existence for a second and reflect on our existence.
This is a product of our more complex cognition. It's entirely natural that once a brain reaches a certain level of cognitive complexity, it gains self-awareness, or consciousness. And humans aren't alone in having this. Just last month, new research came out detailing how lots of animals have consciousness, that they just experience it differently than humans do. The declaration says there's strong scientific support that birds and mammals have conscious experience, and a realistic possibility of consciousness for all vertebrates, including reptiles, amphibians, and fish. That possibility extends to many creatures without backbones. It adds, such as insects, decapods, crustaceans, including crabs and lobsters, and cephalopod mollusks like squids, octopus, and cuttlefish. And even though that research is fairly new, it's long been known that a variety of animals experience self-awareness, like many of our ape cousins, as well as dolphins and some bird species. Again, they just don't express and display that self-awareness the same way that humans do, which has led a lot of theologians thinking that humans are, in fact, the only creatures with consciousness or self-awareness. Basically stemming from human-centric narcissism and saying, if it ain't exactly like our consciousness, then it ain't consciousness at all. But no, lots of animals have the cognitive complexity to experience consciousness.
We have an inherent sense of the divine and the supernatural, which I mentioned previously in this video.
Speak for yourself, moron. Oh my God, that is funny!
No, we don't. I will go as far as to say that we have an inherent need or desire to reduce uncertainty, to understand things about the world around us in order to reduce our fear or anxiety about it. That desire leads us to come up with supernatural explanations when natural explanations are outside of our ability to ascertain or explore, or when it's just easier to jump to magic than it is to seek out the real answers. And this has been misinterpreted as an inherent sense of the divine or supernatural. If we did have this inherent drive for the supernatural, just built into us as humans, we never would have come up with the concept of materialism or naturalism. And more broadly, we wouldn't be as driven to explore and learn about things. We would just be happy with whatever supernatural explanations were attributed to everything around us. We'd still be thinking that the sun was Ra rowing a boat across the sky. But that explanation wasn't good enough for us. We wanted to know the truth, not a supernatural fantasy. And such is the case with all supernatural explanations. We increase our knowledge and ever shrink the gaps in which the supernatural and your God get to hide in. Our inherent drive to increase our understanding is driving away any presumed inherent sense of the divine that you think we have, as indicated by continuously falling rates of religiosity as we increase our collective knowledge.
Lastly, point number 8, I believe in God because I have seen those who have experienced God, who have been transformed by God, and who carry God in themselves. There is no way to encounter a person who has been truly transformed by God and still have doubt as to his existence.
I've encountered many people who have been, quote-unquote, transformed by God. People who used to believe a different faith, or in no faith at all, and became Christian. Yeah, seen and met plenty of them. It's vastly more often that it goes the other way, and people end up leaving religion more than joining it. For instance, it's estimated that 31% of people raised Christian become unaffiliated between ages 15 and 29, the tumultuous period in which religion switching is concentrated. An additional 7% of people raised Christian become unaffiliated later in life after the age of 30. But yeah, I've encountered people who used to not be religious and then became religious. Doesn't appear to be anything more than a person who was looking for something to believe in, or some kind of community or comfort while grieving the death of a loved one, and finding that comfort in the belief in an afterlife. And many more reasons. There's a lot of psychological needs that belief in or adherence to a religion can provide. It can help addicts get clean. It can provide a structure in life for people who need it in order to function in ways that benefit them. It can provide a sense of belonging and inclusion or emotional support to people who don't have it. Yeah, religion can be beneficial in a multitude of ways, none of which even approach any kind of supernatural transformation. And of course, the same transformation that you claim to have seen in people coming into your faith can equally be seen in people in other faiths, including non-Abrahamic ones that directly contradict the idea of the God that you believe in, like Buddhism or Jainism, for instance. How many people do you think have had their lives transformed by adherence to a practically non-theistic religion? Doesn't that indicate that such emotional or psychological transformations are a product of the adopting of the faith itself, rather than intervention from some supernatural figurehead that faith purports to follow? Because that seems abundantly clearly to be the case. So that was Double R's last reason to believe in God from a theology professor. And it seems clear to me why he's a professor of theology, because he couldn't possibly be a professor of anything else, given his low understanding about practically everything else. I mean, he doesn't understand history and how cultures and societies develop. He doesn't understand philosophy and the nature of morality and ethics. He doesn't understand cosmology and how energy and entropy work. He doesn't understand atheism at all, which makes him no different from any other apologist. He doesn't understand how brain chemistry works, and he doesn't understand how social systems can influence a person's psychological state. Basically, all of his reasons for believing in God could be boiled down to, you don't seem to understand how that thing works, and you're just shoving God into it. Not to mention the fact that some of his reasons for believing in God were non sequiturs. And even if everything he said about them were right, wouldn't be any kind of a reason to believe in God. If this video is a microcosm of what one could actually expect if they took a course from this theology professor, and if they were concerned with actually being intellectually challenged, they might want to steer their course load in another direction. So that is where we'll end things for today. So thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe so you'll always be notified when a new video comes out. Don't forget to check me out on Twitter and Patreon if you'd like to support my work directly. My Teespring if you want some Pleeky merchandise. All that linked below in the description. Special shout out to my most recent super thankers here on YouTube, Salvi Mike, William Horton 7313, and James Lamica. Until next time, I'm Professor Plink reminding you to keep striving for greater understanding. It's the best way to get wherever you want to go.